the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Possibly. Hey, this is Matt Scott for AVNation.tv. You are in the first official ResiWeek show. This is going to be a new weekly show that we at AVNation are started. We're really excited about it. I'm particularly excited about it because I'm, at least 50% a residential guy over just commercial. And, this is our first foray directly into the residential market, so we're pretty excited about that. So let's introduce who we've got on our initial show, and I'm going to start pretty much how it's set up on my queue. So we've got Andrea Medeiros. She is the editor-in-chief at Tech Home Builder. How you doing, Andrea?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for coming. Then we have Dave Pedigo. He is the staff nerd and a really long title that he'll happily give us over at Cedia.
Thanks. It's Senior Director of Learning and Emerging Technologies, but I much prefer staff nerd.
See, and that's why we went with that one, because as some of you know, I normally help host the AV App Show where we have a lot of fun, and this one I'm trying to be much more professional. Unfortunately, I invited our next guest, so that may not work out. We've got Joe Whitaker from J. Whitaker Designs. How you doing, bud?
Doing well. Excited to be here with Dave, representing Cedia Board of Directors as well. So it's great we're doing a Resi version of this.
Congratulations on getting reelected.
Yes, it was probably the most exciting voting that has ever happened within Cedia. Biggest voter turnout overall. It was pretty amazing.
That was mainly due to your social media prowess, I will say.
I would hope so.
Perfect. And then last but certainly not least, my good friend Richard Fregosa. How you doing, Fregosa?
Mellow West Coast greetings. I'm going for the trifecta now. I've got AV Week, I've got State of Control, and now the Resi show. So now I can actually completely lose my marbles in my wheelhouse. So glad to be here. Glad to be part of the inaugural show. I think that definitely this is a great new chapter for AVNation, and hopefully being able to get some information out to people who aren't just doing commercial and government, but Resi and all the fun stuff. It's
exactly.
The tagline should be AV Week Resi. Hey, want to see something cool?
I'm not going to tell some of our commercial friends that you said that. We'll leave it alone. All right, so let's get into some of our stories that we've got this week. We're going to start with, honestly, kind of a goofy one. I'm going to throw it up on the screen, possibly. There we go. You can wake up to Missy Elliott yelling at you through Amazon Echo, because who else doesn't want that? Essentially, the premise is there are some ways in which we can throw different voice control and different celebrity voices into Amazon Echo, kind of like the same that I think TomTom had a Mr. T voice that you could put on some of their early issues. Let's start this off with Richard. What's your take on this, my friend?
It's another Trojan horse, and at this point it's another IoT device. It's another company who is trying to come up with a way to create their own standard. So, and what have we always said? What's the best thing about standards? There's so many to choose from.
Everybody's got one.
Why not? It opens the conversation. I've heard some interesting things about it. I've dabbled with it a little bit. I just don't see that other than maybe in a small condo or a townhouse or kind of a central location where you don't have animals or children or ambient noise of the things constantly answering you, that it winds up being a solution that we think of, and so
right.
For our industry. But a manufacturer's trying, and if anything else, competition breeds innovation, and that's the way that I look at it. With that unit coming out, hopefully it forces the other manufacturers in our arena to say, hey, this is, as I say in State of Control all the time, we need to start making things that work and start going towards the consumer and catching up with the tech industry before they wind up swallowing us up.
Very good.
If you don't mind me jumping in here.
Jump in.
So this is my my newbiness here. Richard, I'm going to completely disagree with you, and I hope you're not mad at me. So,
he always holds a grudge. It's cool.
So we actually had a webinar last week where we talked about the state of CES, and it's funny because Rich Green and I kind of came to the same conclusion. This is the year of Amazon Echo. So in fact, we got to the point where So I said to hell with this. So last week I went and I actually bought an Amazon Echo. So I spent all weekend playing with it. And first of all, so I just I have Hugh and Wink in my house just as kind of test beds, see how they work. But I also have a 75-year-old father who just spent 10 days in intensive care. He's not in really good shape. And so this morning, to be honest with you, before I even saw the list of what was going to be the topic, I was teaching my dad, because he's on Lasix and has to go to the bathroom a lot. For him to come out, he uses a flashlight because he lives on my main floor. And I'm like, Dad, all you have to do now is come out and say, Alexa, turn the island lights on, or turn the kitchen lights on. It's worked really well. Now, obviously, I've got about 48 hours of experience using it. But it was really, 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 really well done, and I think that this is, yes, it is a Trojan horse, but I think that this is the first real instance of voice control actually working, and I'm pretty excited about it. Now, I will say, Missy Elliott is not who I want to wake up to. I'd rather have Jennifer Aniston whisper in my ear, tell me something nice. You know, that would probably get me up a little bit faster. But so there you go.
So this is my concern, and I have not had hands-on experience with this device, but I do use Siri a lot on both pretty much all my iDevices. I personally have a bit of an issue with any of these devices constantly listening to me, to the point of, in my truck I've got OnStar. If I'm having a conversation that I do not want anyone ever to hear, we pull the fuse on that device so that no one can hear anything we're saying. Joe, what's your take on that side of things when it comes to some of these smart listening devices?
Well, you know, it's funny because I have a long historied life with voice control, going back to the last EHX in Orlando where Voca introduced voice control for Control 4 and it never took off, and me, you know, helping out the guys at VoicePod when they launched. And I do have an Echo integrated with Control 4, doing about 40 or 50 commands. That portion of it is good, and Dave is right. You know, Echo has taken the technology from just being on a mobile device and actually being a usable home platform, which many people have tried with mobile devices, and it didn't work. Privacy is one of the big issues, but let me take you back to the article real quick. What the subject matter is, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Okay? All right, and here's why. Now, I agree that it is the year of the Echo. Great. And it is breaking ground for us. But really, Misty Elliott, okay, you might have got me if you would have had James Earl Jones or Morgan Freeman, or, you know, something that is actually semi-entertaining to me. But all you're doing is you're selling me that ringtone thing from my voicemail where Pamela Anderson answers my phone for me. It's a gimmick, and to me it's a tasteless gimmick that they're going after. They could have came at me better with, we're going to do better voice integration and we're going to support more products, not we're going to support actors and actresses to line their pockets by sponsorships. It's just silly to me. It's silly. Give me more control of more devices. Use your time on that. Not how
no, that's not going to appeal to the regular millennials, though.
Oh, don't throw millennials into it. Come on.
Well, from the builder side, the millennials are the ones wanting these things. So Missy Elliott, as a millennial, I love me some Missy. I think she's awesome.
I'm gonna work it. Reverse it. The whole thing.
Okay. Joe, you had me at James Earl Jones, though. If they get James Earl Jones, we're done.
I think that they should be publicly talking about newer developments, including more devices, actually bringing all those things together, because that's what we need is one cloud-based somebody to say, okay, we're going to support you on a cloud everywhere, and here is your one control interface, and it can be your voice. That's where their concentration should be.
So is this going to divulge into a Apple versus Amazon fight for control of the integrated home? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen much from Google, who we would have expected to play into this game. Anybody? Nobody?
I don't know.
Facebook wins.
Facebook wins.
Well, I will say, you mentioned Siri as an example. I find, and I'm a big Apple guy personally, not from a CEDIA perspective, from my own perspective, but Siri is just awful. It's just not, it just doesn't really give you the experience you like. When it came to Alexa, you said that you haven't played with it. You should play with it, and don't just dabble here or there. Give yourself a weekend, get some of the connected stuff, and just see how it works. Because it's the deep learning that's the issue with like Siri as an example. There's not enough context, and I always use this example. If any of you watched Back to the Future 2, when I think it's Elizabeth Shue walks into the house and they say, "Ma'am, you should always put your lights on," and she says lights on as a question, not as a command, and the lights come on, and that's a context thing. We're still missing context, but I see the Amazon Echo being significantly further along in contextual awareness than I saw with Siri, and so it's worth a try.
I think from the builder side, this is twofold. It's showing that the DIY stuff is selling in sex sells, and that's why they're using celebrities so that consumers are demanding this technology. And also what Dave mentioned, aging in place has become a huge trend this year in the builder realm. And when you're older and people are living longer, they're going to need technology that they can speak to. That's why you're seeing a lot of iPads, a lot of voice control in the home. My main concern with this was Siri and the effectiveness of voice control. I also haven't tried it, but with what Dave's saying, it certainly makes me more willing to try it. It seems to be better at knowing what I'm saying, whereas Siri usually takes me in the wrong direction and then I'm lost.
There's one more thing that, and we spend a whole lot of time on this, and interacting with technology. I mean, again, people, it's like when you watch 24 or you watch Iron Man, or you watch any of these movies. It's this fantasy of this intelligent dialogue. Right, there's like Dave was saying, there's contextual information. The act of talking out loud to yourself, just psychologically, is an unnatural act, and people tend to forget about that. And again,
what do you mean, Rich? I talk to myself all the time.
Your voices listen and talk back, though. There's the difference. But again, just like Joe was saying, I go back 25 years to things like Butler in a Box, where you had to speak specifically to engage in action, and Siri and all of these things. And I've had the luxury of dealing with some people here in the Silicon Valley, and the issue, and the constant issue, has always been the contextual responses, the nuance of language. And language is extremely complicated because we're humans and our brains can process and we can differentiate nuance. The algorithm to be able to tell the difference between, like what Dave was saying, a statement or a question, not only that, but inflection, dialogue, ... all the way down the road. It's a good shot across the bow. My concern always winds up being is that the gadgetry and the novelty starts out great, and then what happens is that the ripple effect occurs when it doesn't work like the way it's supposed to. I just spent $299 on this. It didn't really do everything that was promised, and so it goes back to education, saying yes, let's focus on this being a tool. Let's focus on it augmenting reliable and robust platforms, but to look at it as a platform unto itself winds up being a lot of the marketing hype and having Missy Elliott and everybody else. It's great, but again, it winds up being a throwaway, and that's my concern, is that we are focusing on throwaway technology again.
Well, the last thing I'll add with this is that there are other competitors coming into the market now with artificial intelligence and voice control. So one that you might want to look at, that it's just early in the infancy stage, but it's a startup, is something called Josh.ai, and they're kind of targeting the custom channel for that. And I've seen their products work where you're able to give it, 5, 10 commands completely, do this, 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 and this, and they're all performed. So whether this is in its infancy or we're really starting to see an actual robust product, just realize that I think we're finally on the full path of natural user interface where it's voice control and they're doing what you want. And just think about the folks with disabilities. One of my good friends, his father just recently passed away from multiple sclerosis, but for the last couple of years he used something very crude but was able to dial in on certain things by voice control. And so just think about the quality of life for people who can't.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. And again, with the Agent in Place and with people with disabilities, it's a fantastic tool. My point again, though, is making it a tool as part of your greater electronic tool belt.
Sure.
And so our job, and especially in the Resi industry, is separating fact from fiction. Making sure, that's really the whole purpose of what we do. We facilitate and advise and say, it's great. I love it. I love the premise of it. Mm-hmm. Over the past 2.5 decades, the execution has been abysmal.
Well, I think
let's hope in the next 5 years we see a difference.
Yeah, I think it always comes back to the fact that in residential specifically, because I dabble in both, our end users are so enamored by technology they see online, in movies, etc., and they think that when you pull in a Surrey or Amazon Echo or anything like this, that instantly it can do everything they see in the movies. And just as Richard said, it's the separation of fact and fiction, which becomes a big thing for the integrator to. Is almost probably more important for the integrator to know how to educate their customers properly on that. But let's move on from that real quick, because we can probably talk about that one forever, and jump into a wonderful article from Tech Home Builder. See, like that plug?
That was so sweet of you to say.
I know, right? So we're actually going to start with Andrea on this one. And this is just talking about how home sensors are starting to soar, as it says right there, and going over some of the trends that we're seeing in the sensor market. And I know that that's something that my company is starting to or continuing to get into, sensor-based stuff, so that when something happens, this can happen. Andrea, how important is this for integrators to pay attention to?
I think it's important to pay attention to, but just like voice control, I think this is in its infancy as far as the way this article's talking about it. It's basically this company talking about putting sensors everywhere, on your coffee pot, where you brush your teeth, being able to tell you if you're brushing your teeth better than your other family members. That might not be a practical use for sensors right now, but we have seen good uses for sensors as far as leak detection, as an example. We covered the Unity home in New Hampshire. That was also at Green Build. We did a video piece on that. They're not collecting the data yet, but they've placed sensors or are placing sensors in some of their homes for leak detection to test for efficiency. We're starting to see sensors when it comes to the healthy home, checking for indoor air quality. Those are the types of sensors that I think we're going to see sooner than whether not competing with your family about brushing your teeth. Although it could be a good way to get your kids to brush, guys.
Exactly. Richard, when it comes to sensors, how far out is this before this becomes commonplace across the board?
We're already seeing it. I mean, we're already doing geolocating and using low power Bluetooth for those reasons, where it's if somebody's walking around and they happen to have their mobile device, and first thing that happens is that when they enter into a range, it pops up and says, "Hey, I see you've entered this room. Do you want to ... But again, this is a custom program solution that we're doing. This is not something currently that is user controllable. It's not a DIY project yet. I think what we'll see is we're starting to see the trickle down that's occurring. Right. And so and really where this is going to come from is from retailers. I mean, it's going to bubble up from retailers. we're going to see that more from people's shopping experience, where they get a little more dulled to constantly being asked questions by their house. I mean, I have it right now where it's like I know I have several apps on my mobile devices that once I'm within range of, you know, a Target or gosh, I forget whatever one of the other retailers, it's like, hey, you're nearby. Did you know, ... and it pulls up the information from my shopping, you know, because of my email. I mean, good news, bad news. It's you know, what is it? Minority Report, right? You know. But again, I think what to go back to what Dave was talking about again, it's sensors are great in that they can be used to leverage the abilities of people who aren't necessarily ambulatory or are aging in place. I mean, again, I love data. I mean, I love aggregating data. I love getting every bit of data that I can get and then optimizing it. Because we've always felt that really all home automation is the identifying and the executing of patterns, taking a pattern and streamlining it to its simplest process, you know, and working with that. So any device that we can find that can help that can operate that can operate, we call it anticipatory service, right? It's already thinking about what you may want to do before you are, and it can help execute that. It's going to be cost. I mean, we're going to have these things riddled all over the place. I think, what was it, AT&T is doing their build out of their network right now where, I mean, they're talking about billions of devices by 2022, I think was the article that I last checked. You know, it's happening. I mean, IoT is happening. And now it becomes a matter of how are we going to ride this wave? And the problem that we have right now with IoT, and again, it's all of these different standards. Everybody's got this this gold rush right now on what they'd like. So we're having to sift through all of that. So you know, again, sensors good, implementation. That's going to be the big question.
Leaving something to be desired, that's for sure.
Yeah. Business Insider had reported, this might be the one you're talking about, which is 34 billion, let's see, by 2020, 34 billion internet-connected devices will be installed globally. Yeah. So that's 4 devices per person on the planet.
On the planet.
Well, it just continues to push that conversation that the AV industry really needs to get behind and get in front of, I guess is probably a better term, the network. They really need to take control of the network in the home, because as we continue to have all these devices available, we're going to need a robust network to maintain it.
I just wanted to piggyback off of what Richard was saying when it comes to the sensors. I just got back from the International Builders Show. Geofencing, when it comes to sensors, was huge there this year. A lot of the top products they were talking about involved geofencing. Why? Because we talk about that ease of use. There are so many products out there now, it kind of takes away that ease of use for the consumer when they have a million different devices that they're trying to integrate and that they're scheduling themselves. The geofencing kind of takes that away. You don't have to use your phone to shut off your lights or turn them on when you're coming home, because the geofencing knows when you're coming home, so it's doing it for you. I believe Lennox new smart thermostat, it's pretty cool looking. You should check that out. They're using geofencing with that. I don't know if you're familiar with big ass fans. They're also launching Haiku Home with LED lights, and they're going to use infrared sensing technology so that the customer doesn't have to think, because if any of you have dealt with customers, they really don't want to think that hard when it comes to using their own technology. So sensors are offering us that type of capability as well.
Yeah, I know just from personal experience, my personal favorite sensor that I'm running in my home right now is I've got a couple different lighting control systems, but we're using Caseta in our guest suite, and it utilizes the geofencing as well. And you know, when my in-laws are here, every time I leave, it pops on and tells me that the lights are left on, and I know that they're upstairs playing with my son Cohen, and I can turn the lights off from my phone, from my watch, from anything, and it's phenomenal how well that unit seemed to be implemented as far as what we're seeing.
Every time this comes up, I like to look at people like Richard and say, Richard, how do you like being the test market for this for the last 10 years? Because, you know, I could say from personal experience, me and my company, we've already been doing these things since 2006. You know, multi-point proximity sensors, water sensors, all the way down to flow valves in the piping inside the home. We've already been doing these things. And then you look at, geofencing, that's huge. It's starting to get big traction, but you've been able to use the Skylark app on the iPhone with Nest thermostats to do backwards programming on that to tell when you're 10 miles from the house, 15 miles from the house, et cetera, for like 2 years. So, everybody's been able to experiment with this and think of an implementation for it. And that's what IoT is starting to get, is, okay, now how can we implement this? Because my biggest argument has always been, with all home technology professionals, period, has been, do you offer home control or do you offer home automation? Do you use motion sensors, proximity sensors, pressure sensors, water sensors? Do you have things happening for your clients by themselves without the client having to press a button? Things that just act upon actions that are happening inside the house. Yes, you're doing home automation. Do they have to pick up their phone or their remote or touch their touchscreen to make something happen? No, you're doing home control. It's the biggest argument ever, and these sensors is what have brought us to this point. And that's why, like, the stuff I saw at CES, I didn't go, I was following Dave, actually, and some of the stuff that he was seeing, and Julie, of course. Some of the things that were out there are their fruition of what we've been preaching and we've been talking about, and we as the professionals have been experimenting with for 20 years. Now we're starting to see it where the cassetta, which I have some, that's pretty awesome that now we can go down to a decent price point, easy to put in, easy programming, and it's just boom, we're in.
Well, and I think that's probably the biggest shift as we're getting into IoT and sensors and everything else in today's day and age, is that, like, gosh, when did Bill Gates do his house that was such a big deal? Like 30 years ago. No, the one before that.
Oh, the original Home of the Future.
RFID, the original one, the original Home of the Future, where he was using the RFID tags, and so
yes,
you would be issued an RFID tag, and as you pass through, you could swipe, and yes.
Exactly. So now we're seeing it in products like Caseta or Nest or some of these other devices. We're now seeing this come across and be a very simple installation, something that can be DIY or isn't going to cost you an absolute fortune to hire a company like myself or Joe's or Richard's and have some of this capability down the road. I think it's phenomenal where we're at and looking forward to seeing where it's going. But let's grab one last article before I let everyone go. And
because if you want a DIY, this is what happens.
Exactly. Oh, you want to pull that one? I was going to go to the FCC one, but we can pull that one. No, let's do it. As long as I can make my screen share work. There we go. All right, this was on CE Pro, and this was our good friend Julie Jacobson. She got a email from a gentleman named John talking about DIY and some of the other stuff down the road. So essentially the premise of the article is that he was getting into trying to do this and figuring out that it wasn't DIY automation or control, depending however you want to chat about it, is not as simple as it sounds. And this is something that I'm sure Joe's seen. I know Richard has seen it. I know we've seen it, where someone jumps into home automation and they go to Home Depot or they buy stuff on Amazon and they get going and realize that it's not as simple as they thought to get it all running. Richard, since you kind of brought this one up, I'll let you jump in on this one first.
I mean, it's the perfect example of where we're at right now. It's that we have lots and lots of companies who are saying, you can do this now. Home automation is now within your fingertips, and they're all competing for that same dollar. And what we're finding out, unfortunately, is that people are making these purchases, and they are. And again, it's not a 5-figure purchase anymore. It's not even a 4-figure purchase anymore. It's a sub $500 purchase, which allows people to say, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And we're running into this issue, which is again, this is what HomeKit was supposed to come around and do. This was what Google was supposed to do 3 years ago. This is what several manufacturers have jumped in, and these large players have said, and we're going to go ahead and make everybody talk. There is no comprehensive standard. And the problem that we have is it's much like consumer electronics 20 years ago. Every manufacturer had to, like when they made an audio-video receiver, right? Say there's 15 of these manufacturers. All of them had to make their units just different enough to be incompatible with what anybody else is doing in order to protect what they thought was their intellectual property or their market share or anything else. That's what we're seeing right now. Every company who comes in thinks that they've got the best idea possible, and everybody who doesn't just see how awesome they are is a moron. And so you've got hundreds and hundreds of these companies coming in that's saying, I've got the best one. You're all idiots. Just use mine. And what's happening right now is the consumers are losing. And we keep coming back to the same thing. Education. We keep coming back to, how do we do this? And again, figure we have an association whose role is to educate the homeowner. I view it as an opportunity. When I read that entire article, the first thing that happened is the acid in my stomach bubbled up, and then I looked and I went, oh wow, that's opportunity. That's the ability to be able to say, hey, look, you've got a choice. Yes, you can learn and you can become a client for life once we get you in the right position. Or you wind up being that person who's burned out on the automation and says, oh yeah, I tried that stuff, all of it's junk, and I don't use it anymore and don't even bother. My clients sooner or later are going to shuffle the mortal coil. My clients, for the most part, aren't getting any younger. And so my goal and our focus has been is the fact that we're trying to get our clients, when they're in their 20s, when they're in their late 20s, early 30s, so that they can be continuing clients. So as their buying power and their lifestyles change, that the technology and their needs and their comfort will go along with it. And so, this is a start, but again, it's when I read this article and I read it, it was absolutely why, for now, I think companies like mine and Joe's and Matt's, we exist, and as an industry, we exist. It's our job. And right now, I'm a zealot. I feel like an acolyte of home automation and say, no, this can be better. This can be a lot better. I got to evangelize at this point. And that's what I see is that it's more or less it's a siren call to for us as integrators and our industry to evangelize what it is we do, because we've been doing it for 25 years. We've already gone through all of this. This is not new stuff. It's just new to the consumer.
Right.
And I think it's a little different now because it's not just about educating the consumer, it's about educating a lot of high-volume builders who are installing these systems as a solution to their consumer demands. And those types of homes are being bought up by millennials who are entering the marketplace, and then there's a risk that those systems aren't going to work because a lot of these builders can't afford to work with integrators. They can't keep it in their price point. So there's a lot of that going on as well. We've been into a lot of homes, I won't mention any names, but where the keyless entry locks aren't working, or they're using a cable company's home automation system, and that's the first view that these consumers are getting of a lot of these technologies. So that's a little bit scary too, and that's why we feel like it's so important here to educate the builder almost as if they are a consumer, because a lot of them are just dipping into these technologies.
Right. So, Dave, where does or how does CEDIA view an article like this? Does this become an opportunity? Does this become a challenge? What's your take?
Well, I would say that it is the double-edged sword. It's certainly an opportunity, and way earlier when you talked, I think Richard had mentioned the beauty of standards is there's so many to choose from. Part of actually my job moving forward, I'm going to be transitioning a little bit, is to work helping manufacturers communicate and figure out ways that they can work together to make the overall experience better. For my formula personally for success for our industry is, number one, it's reliable. Number two, it's simple to use, and then whatever else you want is fine. But if it's not working 99.99% of the time and it's not easy to use, it's not worth it. And that's what I think distinguishes a lot of the CEDIA dealers from some of the other companies, is the reliability side. And when someone mentioned earlier the network, I think it was you, Matt, if you're not putting in really almost enterprise-grade networks, we're hanging so many things on that line, and it just causes it to sag. So so I think it is a big opportunity for us. The hard part is what you had mentioned earlier, though, is that the consumer messaging is that for every one negative experience you have, it takes 10 positive experiences to kind of overcome that. And there's so many crappy experiences out there. You know, I know I talked about Amazon and said that it works well, but for every one of those, there's a million. I mean, there's not a million, but there's so many products out there that they work great 80% of the time. But you know, that's not the opportunity. What's the line from Ron Burgundy? 60% of the time it works all the time. Well, that's not going to really work out for us, and so that's putting kind of a stain on the industry. So there's as much danger in turning people off as there is to the opportunity of growth.
Very nice. All right, Joe, we'll give you kind of the last word, and then we're going to wrap up.
All right. Does anybody remember X10? I'm just kidding. I mean, there's where we started with all this, is with X10. And when we come into these things, it's kind of like, from an integrator standpoint, or the article that was written by Julie, it's okay. So you also need this hub, this connector, this adapter, this blah, 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 blah. You know, the stack goes on and on. And while it'd be great, you know, to talk to manufacturers and get those guys consolidated on some kind of standard, it's never going to happen because they have manufacturing holdbacks. I'm a manufacturer and I can only use Z-Wave antennas for the next 15 years because I got a contract, so I can't do Zigbee. And Thread won't let me in the door. So it is seriously going to be, you know, the only fix for this is going to be either custom integrators and home technology professionals that can teach these people how to blend them together, or it's going to be a guy like Mark Zuckerberg that says, I have the biggest database of humans, bigger than the CIA. I have the biggest database of humans, and I can reach every one of them. And since all of these platforms use some kind of VPN, some kind of web presence, I don't care about their antennas. I'm going to blend them together in the cloud. That is where it's going to get fixed. It's never going to get fixed in the hardware. It's never going to get fixed in the home. Somebody's going to have to find a way to blend them together on a much, much higher level.
Well, yeah, and since we're already seeing, you know, the industry and just technology in general, everything going towards the cloud, that makes a lot of sense. All right, that is it. We are over our time. I'm going to get yelled at later, and I'm going to blame it on Richard. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us on the inaugural episode of AV Week. I'm Matt Scott. Let's thank you, Andrea, for being with us. Where can people find you?
They can find me at the website, techhomebuilder.com. Also, check out Tech Home X. It's a trade show we're launching involving builders, integrators, contractors, bringing everyone together who's doing this type of technology that we just talked about to educate us on how to do it properly.
Excellent. Very good. Dave, again, thanks for being on us for your first time on an AVNation podcast. Hopefully we were fairly well behaved.
Oh, you guys were great. I think I'm the one who pushed you over limits there. So.
Oh, no. It was totally Richard. It was 100% Richard. Do you have any contact information you want to give out?
Yeah, just if you're looking for myself or anyone else at CEDIA, it's very easy to find us, just cedia.org, and we're happy to talk to you anytime.
Beautiful. All right, Joe, you are up next.
Joe Whitaker, just visit thethoughtfulhome.com. If you want any information about CEDIA, cedia.org. If you're actually a user, an end user who is actually watching this podcast, also go to cedia.net.
Very nice. And last but not least, Richard, thanks so much, bud, for being on the show with me.
Absolutely. I guess you can find me at blameunclerichy.com.
You know I can have that made very quickly.
It's great. I'm really excited that we're getting the opportunity to speak to an important part of the market as well, and have some great people here. I love having the CEDIA presence, and you know, this is the mountaintop I love evangelizing from. So love it. If you want to find me, you can find me on the Twitters at @ArtFregosa. You can also find me at fregosadesign.com, on CE Pro, also appearing now in Electronic House. Coming up soon, and also here with my compatriots here at AVNation, and otherwise just type in my name in the Googles and sometimes things pop up.
Beautiful. And for myself, you can obviously find me at Matt D. Scott on pretty much any social media platform. I'm there if I'm around. Otherwise, Google me. I'm pretty easy to find. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv. Follow at AVNation.tv as well on Twitter and everything else. And stay tuned for more episodes like this on Resi shows, as well as, of course, AV Week and all of our other flagship shows. And more importantly, or most importantly, we will also be covering ISE. So anyone in Europe or anyone in North America who wants to follow what's going down at ISE, definitely follow all of us. We'll be there and reporting live. So for AV Nation, have a good day. Thanks so much for listening.